Good morning, everyone. Let's look at Monadil Dowd's adaptation of Romeo and Juliet in Baghdad. So the plot of the play has been subverted to outline the current struggle for power gripping Iraq. Before I start with the plot, let's look at the biography of Monadil Daoud. So he was born in 1960 in Basra, it's in Iraq. He also has a PhD in performing arts and has a high diploma in theater directing from the Theater Academy in Russia. He also has a diploma in directing from Fine Arts Institute, Baghdad. Currently, he is a director in the Department of Cinema and Theater in the Iraqi Ministry of Culture. He is an actor and also wrote many plays. Romeo and Juliet in Baghdad has been staged in Baghdad and received a production in Stratford, England, as well as at the World Shakespeare Festival in 2012. Commissioned by the World Shakespeare Festival, the play uses Shakespeare to comment on contemporary political and social concerns. It is the first play since the official end of combat in Iraq, and scars and wounds of war from continued violence form the context for both artist and characters. Now, adapted and directed by Monadil Daoud, he explained in one interview, he says, "I am the legitimate son of tragedy. Understand that we live in a place where terrorists break our homes over our heads." So the play provides important perspectives on life in post-war Iraq, although the play juxtaposes the bleak cycle of violence and revenge of Shakespeare's tragedy. The play started with gunfire and light flashes from the explosions that deliver the quotidian violence and the long history of Iraq's capital city. The play makes an effort to make the audience feel the experience of living under such disruptive and soul-destroying conditions. By setting Romeo and Juliet in modern-day Baghdad, Daoud not only highlights the exasperation but also the aspirations of Iraqis who have lived through the past decades' cycle of revenge and violence. In the play, the Capulets and Montagues are warring families of Sunni and Shia, and the lovers Romeo and Juliet must negotiate danger with the impossibility of their relationship. Okay, now the plot. The plot has been subverted to outline the current struggle for power gripping Iraq. The play starts with the history professor lamenting. He says, "The night should be for lovers," as the play opens with sirens, bombs, and machine guns. Through intervention of the teacher, the play seems to implore the West to better understanding the brutal realities of life in a city so long torn by war and the price it exacts on all its inhabitants. There appears an American general, and the rattle of machine guns is, from time to time, heard off stage. The play starts with a clever scene between two rowing brothers, Capulets and Montagues, over control of a ship their father had left them, a metaphor for political control of the country, which in the 9 years since the war began has been held by the majority Shia for more than 30 years. There are a number of references to the boat which these families find themselves in, which apparently is both a physical and metaphoric reference to the disagreements between the Sunni and Shia people. The age-old rivalry between the Montagues and Capulets is thus transposed into a sectarian conflict, with the two families representing the Shia and Sunni Iraqi communities respectively. The dogmatism of both sides is heavily emphasized both by illogical arguments presented by two rivals, and the fight over power is seen cascading catastrophically to the younger generation. Now Romeo words, I have fire in my heart, Dad. All the water in the world can't quench this fire. So it is, you can find it in scene 3, are the cliches of a man in love and undermine the grown-up wariness that define his character. Now, the lovers are reunited at the Capulets' party after 9 years of separation due to the violent feud between the two families over the ship. But Juliet cannot go against the patriarchy. She says, my kinsmen would kill anyone who tried to even look at their girls. Juliet's father establishes the Capulet Sunni by trying to marry Juliet to Paris, a foreign-born Al-Qaeda operative wearing an explosive vest, a mujahid, against her will. So, this is a reference to foreign fighters who came to Iraq after the 2003 US-led invasion. In a later scene, Capulet kicked Paris off the stage and called off the marriage arrangement. So this moment demonstrated the fierceness of Arabs' feelings against those who have terrorized both their kin and reputation, and also suggests that many young Arab women like Juliet lack agency in their father's house. Benvolio is played by a young boy proudly sporting his Messi football shirt and dreaming of another world where skills in heading the soccer ball rather than firing a gun might be rewarded. This is from scene 12. Here, the play advertises a world of hope, but it falls short where Lotta dissipates into the everyday normal. You find anger, hatred, and death. Mercutio cries out pitifully after being shot, trying to protect Romeo from Tybalt's drawn weapon. He says, I'm going to die. This is from scene 12. I don't want to die. It means none of these young men want to be here, and none of them can possibly leave. At the end of the play, the young lovers find sanctuary in the church, but instead of the mistaken deaths in Shakespeare's play that bring a tragic end, in Monadill's Romeo and Juliet, Paris gets to resolve the plot by suicide bombing that shocks, as it underscores the loss of love in this world. So, this suicide bombing refers to a specific attack on 31st October 2010 in Iraq, in which militants killed 44 worshippers and 2 priests in Ladies' Salvation Church in Baghdad. So, in the beginning of the play, you see this, the sound of the gunfire and explosions. Young people run in all directions, carrying weapons. So, history professor says, a long time would pass before we could comprehend the magnitude of what had happened. Alas, our homeland had become an arid wasteland, unable to support our ambitions. This is from scene 1. So the play tackles the issue of post-war Iraq. The sound of gunfire automatically transports you to the back streets of post-war Baghdad. strobe lighting mimicking the effect of a nighttime raid. This is Baghdad, where sectarian divisions fragment the community and where gang violence rules the urban landscape. We also have in scene 3 history professor saying, enough, all you can talk about is religion, and religion has nothing to do with what you claim it does. It has been years. Haven't you had enough of killing? Haven't you had enough of animosity? Your clothes are stained with blood. The ground is angry with you. You have been fighting for years. When are you going to have had enough? And he kept on repeating, enough, enough. So the history professor is like Fair Lawrence, who plays the part of a wise advisor to Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. In this play, he represents the voice of reason in the Iraqi intelligentsia. Enough, 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 he repeatedly calls, begging those around him to drop their weapons and see the foolishness of their own actions. He's reminding how people survived the brutality of Saddam's regime while many of his contemporaries were exiled or killed. And over the years, he has seen Iraq transform itself politically and socially. Then you find in scene 15 a large explosion. She falls to the ground. She means Juliet. Romeo says, she's upset, upset at everyone. We are no good. What are we? We are killing each other. We are killing our brothers. She got fed up with us. Not just 1 or 2 years. Killing and killing. So, the turmoil of post-war Iraq, devastated by sectarian violence and religious fundamentalism on the one hand and foreign interference on the others, was perfectly encapsulated in the tale of two lovers struggling to be together against all odds. The tragedy and absurdity of the feud between the Montagues and Capulets provides the perfect metaphor for the ongoing power struggle between the Sunnis and Shias of Iraq. So this is the prologue from Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet. Now why did I bring here is that this prologue of Shakespeare gives away the story of the play of Munadil's Daoud. So it mirrors the situation between the Sunnis and Shias. Like if you, in the second line, if you remove fair Verona and you put Iraq, so it mirrors the situation of Iraq during that time. So Shakespeare was not only suited to his own time, so he is also suited in the time of Iraq during the war. So Shakespeare is a universal figure. Now let's see the departure from the original text. Romeo and Juliet were not Veronese teenagers, but rather young adults who had been lovers 9 years ago, that is, before the war. The prior love relationship between Romeo and Juliet had been kept apart since childhood. Capulets and Montague were not only business rivals, but were also brothers. Their feud was over the pearl boat left to them by their father. Capulet wore a red and white scarf. That is why, from the beginning, I have highlighted Capulet in red, while Montague's black and white scarf made him a Shia. The words Sunni and Shia are not mentioned explicitly, but are symbolized in ways that are clearly recognizable to an Iraqi audience. The absence of Rosalind plot. Here, in Arab Shakespeare, you don't find the Rosalind plot. Paris, Juliet's failed suitor, is shown as a foreign-born Al-Qaeda operative who enters the church wearing a belt of explosives and blows himself up. So it is not poison or dagger that takes the lives of the young lovers, but a suicide bomb. Lady Montag rouses the conscience of her brother-in-law Capulet, who then curses surrendering his country to Al-Qaeda, that is Paris. Iraqi colloquial Arabic language and invention of metaphors, mixed words like he's a man in his head means being a man has a lot of cultural and social references that don't mean the same thing to English audiences, and these elements try to show the reality of true Iraq. There are so many uh, contrast and similarities you will find, but I have given this much for you all. Anyway, let's proceed. Now, edited by Daniel Tishlian, he points out in Outer Spheres, Shakespeare Intermedia and the Limits of Adaptation, that crossing borders, imagining alternatives, reinscribing histories, these are all techniques that adaptation activates in intercultural contexts that play with the tension that exists in familiar Shakespearean storylines remade in new contexts. Remaking in this way is both an act of defamiliarization to the Shakespeare original and an act of refamiliarization to the audience that it sees itself newly represented in the adapted context. Shakespearean culture, in short, intermediates between and across culture to produce new meanings. The Iraqi example reminds us that intermedial adaptation is as much about technologies of representation as about the content and cultural context that are translated from one performance space to another. In conclusion, due to the oppression people witnessed during the American intervention, Iraqi writers adopted the theme of violence. The play helped viewers understand tight-knit family structure and one strong historic relationship between Shia and Sunni Muslim that are now being broken down. The play reflects on how pride, regret, a lack of mutual understanding, and interference are obstacles to resolving conflicts and divide groups of people. Conflict persists across human societies and it must be addressed before it spirals out of control. But most of all, the aspirations to love and be loved is present in all times and places, whether in Baghdad or Verona, for lovers like Romeo and Juliet, or for brothers like Montag and Capulet. So that's it. Thank you.